Welcome back to the Fallon Forum. Thanks, folks. And again, we're broadcasting live from Des Moines, Iowa, the cultural and culinary crossroads of America. And I want to take a second to thank some of our local business partners for their support. Gateway Market and Cafe, my grocery store and a great place for breakfast, lunch, and supper. Gateway Market also has an excellent catering service. That's Gateway Market and Cafe. Thanks also to Hawk Restaurant, where 90% of the food served comes from Iowa farms and Iowa producers. Thanks also to Sargent's Garage. Don't toss your old car yet, folks. Take it to Sargent's. They'll give you a fair price and the right diagnosis every time. And thanks to Diversity Insurance, located at 1541 East Grand in Des Moines. No appointment needed. That's Diversity Insurance. And finally, thanks to Community CPA, with offices in Des Moines and Iowa City. Owner and founder Ying Sa, she'll do whatever. She's got your taxes and accounting questions covered, folks. I've been going with Ying for years. All right, so welcome back to the show. I'm delighted to have Tulsi Gabbard in the studio with us.
Thank you.
Tulsi is a congresswoman from Hawaii.
Yes, sir. Aloha.
And aloha, yes. No lei today?
No, unfortunately, we're a little far from home. And the fresh flowers don't always last too long.
Well, I see them. I see your folks even at campaign events sporting those.
Yeah, it's been actually really funny and cool that wherever we go, even in the middle of winter, both here in Iowa and New Hampshire, we've seen people showing up with their little plastic luau leis, and it's a really cool ode to my home state of Hawaii.
Insulate them a bit, they could actually double as a scarf, right?
I suppose so. I've never thought of that. It's a good idea.
Yeah. Well, great to have you here. And
Thank you.
And you know, it seems like the main theme of your campaign is to end the regime change wars.
It is focused on the point that our foreign policy cannot be separated from every domestic challenge that we face because of the cost of war. So the experience that I bring, serving now as a soldier for over 16 years, still in the Army National Guard, having deployed twice to the Middle East, as well as my service in Congress, now for almost 7 years on the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Armed Services Committee, and Homeland Security's Committee, give me that experience and depth and understanding and the conviction necessary to be prepared to do the job of President and Commander-in-Chief on day one, and to end these wasteful regime change wars, stop us from starting new ones, and also work to end this new Cold War we're in with escalating tensions between the United States and other nuclear-armed countries like Russia and China, the arms race that is ensuing and escalating, more money coming out of our pockets, ending these wars and weapons and redirecting our precious limited resources, our taxpayer dollars, towards serving the needs of the American people here at home.
So let me ask you, since World War II, which I think was a very different type of war than we've ever seen in our lifetime.
Absolutely.
Has there ever been a war that the U.S. has initiated or been involved with that's not been a regime change war?
Yes. The war to defeat the Al-Qaeda terrorists who attacked us on 9/11.
Okay.
Unconventional, non-traditional enemy, to say the least. But this terrorist group attacked us. We just observed the 18th anniversary of 9/11 last week. And this war continues because Al-Qaeda and their offshoot and affiliate terrorist groups like ISIS, Al-Nusra, HTS in Syria, Al-Shabaab, they continue to pose a threat to the American people. And we need to defeat them not only militarily, but also we need to defeat that ideology. The unfortunate and disheartening thing is that since 9/11, that attack has been used to wage a whole number of regime change wars in countries like Iraq, Libya, ongoing now in Syria, that has cost us as taxpayers trillions of dollars. Trillions of dollars, thousands of my brothers and sisters in uniform who never made that trip home.
And foreign lives as well.
And the pain and suffering and destruction and death in these other countries where we've waged these wars. And all of this bringing us to the point now where 18 years after that attack on 9/11 by Al-Qaeda, Al-Qaeda is stronger today than they were back in 9/11, 2001.
Yeah, that's scary. And now does this perspective on foreign policy put you at odds with others within the military establishment? I mean, you're a major in the National Guard, but there's folks above you, and how does this settle with them?
Well, you know, there are different personal views that service members have on foreign policy and politics. The thing is that with our service members, we salute the flag, we serve our country, and we take that oath seriously, that oath to protect and defend the American people, our Constitution, and our country. The problem here is with the policymakers. General officers and soldiers or service members, they're not the ones making the decisions about where to go to war or not to go to war. Very often, those of us who have seen the cost of war firsthand are often the ones who fight hardest for peace. I think we got to focus on the policymakers, both those who have served in the White House, who are currently serving in the White House, as well as members of Congress, because they are the ones who have either voted for authorizations or made decisions to go and wage these wars to overthrow authoritarian dictators in other countries, then begin, nation-building efforts in these other countries that end up costing us, both as service members, our veterans, and as taxpayers, so dearly.
Yeah. Now, in standing with your other military personnel, veterans in particular, you went to Standing Rock in December of 2016. We were there at the same time.
Oh, no kidding!
That was crazy.
Wow,
how busy it was.
It was. But, I was not expecting to see so many people.
First of all, how does a Hawaiian do in North Dakota in December?
Well, you were there that same time.
But I'm an island. I'm used
that
to
short
cold.
weekend we were there. There was a blizzard, though.
I remember that.
It was
in a tent.
way below zero.
Yeah.
So I was very, very bundled up. But it was such an incredible experience to be there as part of a call to serve and protect, joining veterans from all across this country, from those who served in many different generations and conflicts, coming to stand to protect water and to protect life.
And your being there was a statement of support for indigenous communities, but also a statement of opposition to the Dakota Access Pipeline.
Yes.
And right now the Dakota Access Pipeline wants to double the flow of oil through North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, Illinois, and they want to increase it to 1.1 million barrels of oil a day, which is tragic in terms of climate, but it's also problematic in terms of the probability. Inevitably there'll be a spill.
Well, there already has been, and that's been the thing, is people who were critical of us as water protectors and those who were opposing the building of that pipeline, especially through the route that they chose, say, oh, technology's advanced so much that these new pipelines, they don't leak. The ones where you have leaks and spills, those are the old ones that were built so long ago. But it was, I don't know if it was a matter of weeks or months after that Dakota Access Pipeline was built that there were already leaks and spills happening.
In South Dakota, I believe.
Yeah, exactly.
We have not had one in Iowa yet that I'm aware of, but again, it's just a matter of time. And as you increase the flow of oil, you increase the pressure, the heat,
and the probability
and the amount of oil that could spill. So
exactly.
Thank you for speaking out against that.
Yeah, well, this is one of the many reasons why we need to make this transition off of fossil fuels.
And you have legislation to do that.
I do, to invest in a clean, renewable energy economy. This is so important on many levels, and we can't afford to wait.
And your legislation is called OFF.
It is called the OFF Act, Off Fossil Fuels Act, and it provides an actionable plan for us as a country to be able to make that transition over a period of time, also recognizing that we've got to not only take our taxpayer dollars that are going to subsidize big fossil fuel giants now, but redirect those dollars towards incentivizing and investing in clean renewable energy and bringing along the workforce with us.
And how is the OFF legislation different than what some of the other candidates are proposing? How is your bill different, or let's say better, than what Joe Biden, what other candidates are offering?
I haven't looked at all of their plans, but I think there's a very significant point of distinction between the approach I think we need to take and what many of the other candidates are talking about. I think nuclear power should not be an option that we consider. It is way, way more expensive and takes so much longer to build and develop than many of the other clean renewable sources of energy that I think we should be investing in, that we can get up and running more quickly. What to speak of the fact that it doesn't carry the kind of risk and danger that we've seen nuclear power plants can pose. What to speak of the waste that's created, that still there's no place to store this waste in the United States of America and no foreseeable plan to get there. And so what we end up with are communities who are often underserved communities who have piles of nuclear waste sitting next to their homes, next to their place of work in the schools, posing a risk and threat to them.
Maybe you saw the news that Japan is going to be releasing some of the waste from Fukushima into the ocean.
It's very dangerous. I mean, I come from Hawaii. We share
that
Pacific
ocean,
Ocean, and we're really concerned about that.
Now, typically your profile is the kind of profile that you would think the Democratic Party would love. I mean, an experienced congresswoman who has knowledge of foreign policy, knowledge of domestic affairs, who is not just a lot of times candidates run on the fact that they are a veteran, but you're actually active.
Yeah.
You just got back from Indonesia.
Yeah.
You would think that profile would be appealing to more of the, establishment within the Democratic Party. Why is that not connecting?
Because I speak truth to power. And the foreign policy establishment, the military-industrial complex, and the partisan powers in Washington, they don't like people who will challenge their authority and call for accountability and speak the truth about the cost and consequences of the decisions that our leaders have been making. So whether we're talking about on the political side, calling for fairness, transparency, and accountability, after those 2016 elections, there were a lot of people who were very frustrated by the lack of fairness throughout that process, and as a result, calling for the end of superdelegates, making it so that our voices as voters is what's represented and how we choose our nominee as Democrats,
so what does it
rather than the power being put into the hands of a few select individuals.
Sure. What does it say about the Democratic Party?
That we need reform.
Yeah.
That we need reform in many ways to make sure that our party, and I'm proud to be a Democrat, we got to make sure that our party is one that's actually the party of the people, that's advocating for the voiceless, not a party that sees themselves as the gatekeepers determining who they feel the American people should be allowed to hear from and who they shouldn't, and trying to pre-select those that they feel worthy to serve as president. And we've got to get the corruption out of our party. I think it's at a time when so many of our leaders are rightly focusing on the problem of climate change. Our party leadership has chosen to take fossil fuel money.
Yeah.
What does that say about priorities?
700,000 plus in the most recent report that I understand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So these are some of the change. I think this is where the people's voice is. We've got an opportunity to put that pressure on, as we should. Hold leaders accountable. Let them know, hey, you're in a position to serve the people. You've got to make sure that you're actually doing so.
Yeah. So I know a couple things that continually surface as ways of kind of discrediting your candidacy are Assad, let's save him for later, and LGBTQ comments that were made years ago. And I watched your video explaining how you had evolved on that.
Yeah.
And how you came from a very conservative family with a father who was pretty strongly anti-gay.
Yeah.
And that it was hard to avoid, absorbing some of that. But then you had a significant transformation even. And actually a lot sooner than Hillary Clinton did. Yet somehow Democratic voters didn't have a problem with her changing her position on that. And yet some of them do have a problem. They don't accept your transformation on that, even though I think if people watch the video, they'll say, wow, that's a lot of contrition there and a lot of evolution.
Yeah.
So I mean, what needs to happen with that to get it to move?
It just points to people who, and I've spent time with and talked to people who kind of fall into two different categories. One are people who have already determined that they are political opponents of mine for whatever reason, and they're not open to what I have to say or to share my own experience and how my views have evolved and how I've actually carried through. This isn't something that just happened yesterday, that this is something that happened some time ago, and that I made a commitment to fight for equality and have done so throughout my entire time in Congress, and something I'll continue to do so as president. There are other folks who have concerns about my past and things that I've said and done, which is deserved, but they come with an open heart and an open mind. And after we've had a chance to talk, or they've heard what I've said and what I've done, most importantly, they are appreciative, not because of anything that I've done, but because we're fighting for positive changes. We fight for equality, we fight for respect and an end to discrimination against our fellow Americans, whether it be because of orientation or gender or race, ethnicity, or religion. I think we should hope that people would be more open-minded to maybe considering views that they hadn't been aware of or hadn't held previously. If we don't allow the space for people to change, then we as a country will never be able to move forward.
I guess how do you get that through to people? I mean, it just.
Well, again, I mean, people are either open to it or they're not.
Yeah.
And for those who are open to it, what I've seen is not only expression of thanks and appreciation, but a welcoming and very strong support.
Yeah. Another issue that comes up in terms of concerns about Tulsi Gabbard, or the meeting with Assad, with the Syrian leader, and I mean that it's been hard to get the political establishment to even comment on that, or at least it was for a while. But now it seems to be something that again they want to raise. And at the same time, I mean, we see President Trump being criticized for meeting with dictators, but at the same time, and I guess when Trump does it, I don't know what's expected or what's going to come of it or what its real motives are.
Yeah.
But Obama was criticized for meeting with, was criticized by Republicans for meeting with, or saying he would meet with world leaders.
That's right.
Who were of a different.
Even just saying it.
Even just saying it,
That's
right. But then when he actually. When he was president, then Democrats supported that. Democrats thought, hey, that's good that we want to go out there and talk to people who might be considered enemies. So why, again, I'm trying to understand the double standard. Good when Obama does it, bad when Tulsi Gabbard does it, meaningless when Trump does it, I get that part. But why the different standard between Obama in this case and you?
Because I am challenging the foreign policy establishment in Washington and the military-industrial complex that have held such sway over both presidents and leaders in Congress for so long, leaders from both political parties who are responsible for continuing to wage these wasteful, counterproductive wars that do not serve the interests of the American people and do not serve the interests of the people in the countries where we wage these wars. What I'm doing is challenging them with the truth of the consequences of their actions and their decisions. And so, they try to undermine my campaign with different smear tactics and accusations and all these things without any evidence because they're unwilling to debate me or talk to me really about the substance of why is it so important that we choose diplomacy over war. I'd be willing to meet with a dictator or an adversary or potential adversary in the pursuit of our country's national security and in the pursuit of peace, like many of our great leaders have done so in the past.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, and President Trump was till recently intending to meet with the Taliban. Yeah. And it never happened. It would be interesting to see how Republicans and Democrats both would have responded. But,
Here's the reality: if you're not willing to talk, if you're not willing to meet, if you're not willing to pursue diplomacy, the only alternative is war. Yeah. That's a fact. And we look to Roosevelt meeting with Stalin. Stalin was a murderous dictator, responsible for the deaths of tens of millions of people. JFK meeting with Khrushchev. Nixon going and meeting with Mao. Roosevelt working with Gorbachev on the INF Treaty. There are so many different examples of leaders doing things that may have been politically unpopular. They got criticized for it in many cases, but doing so because that was in the interest of our national security, the safety of the American people, and peace.
So what did you hope to accomplish with that meeting with Assad?
The invitation came, and because of all the reasons we just talked about, I accepted that invitation to meet, to be able to hear what he had to say, and to be able to ask him a lot of questions that I had.
Do you think anything came of it?
I was able to come back not only from that meeting, but from all of the meetings that I had with people, the visits that I had with people across Syria, religious leaders, Christians, Catholics, religious minorities, college students, leaders of the political opposition, some of the strongest leaders who were opposing Assad. We met with children, refugees, small business owners, people across the spectrum, coming back and bringing the message that I had been pounding on for even before I went to Syria, which is we've got to end these regime change wars. A lot of people don't know we've been waging a regime change war in Syria since 2011.
Yeah,
and it's caused a lot of destruction. It's cost the American people a lot of money, and we've got to stop.
My impression is there's no real good guy in the Syrian war. There's just a lot of people who are being hurt and destroyed and forced into exile.
Yeah, and what's happened, we can control what we can control here in the United States, and the actions that we take and the policies that we have, and the policy that we have had in Syria and this regime change war, using American taxpayer dollars to both directly and indirectly provide arms and support to terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda, because they're the strongest fighting force on the ground to overthrow the government, just shows, as one example, how destructive our policy has been, dismissing the reality that if we were successful and Al-Qaeda was successful in overthrowing the Assad government, overthrowing the Syrian government of Assad, they would take over. There wouldn't be a peaceful pro-democracy leader who takes over, because whether we like it or not, they're not the powerful force on the ground. You would see Al-Qaeda and their offshoots and affiliates take over, and the first thing that they would do is go in and assassinate Christians and Catholics in specific extreme ideology. So, you know, again, we've got to look at the cost and consequences of our decisions. I have seen firsthand the cost of war. It's why I'm so committed to continuing this campaign to bring about an end to these wasteful wars.
Yeah, well, excellent. One last question before we got to run to the end of the show. We've got a hard break coming up.
Sure.
The DNC seems to be doing its part to make sure you aren't included in debates. They've been very selective about which polls qualify.
Yeah.
And you've actually scored higher than 2% in some of the polls that the DNC decides don't matter.
Yeah, I think
How do you feel about that?
I think we've seen about 30 polls at this point that show me either meeting or exceeding the DNC's 2% threshold. The DNC's only chosen to recognize 2 of those. Look, I think ultimately this is a disservice to the people, because there's a lack of transparency in how they're making this decision. You know, what polls they're choosing as qualifying or accurate versus others. And, you know, this sows distrust in people that this is not a fair process that's working for a strong and fair democratic primary. Debates are helpful because they give us the opportunity to get in front of millions of people, raise name recognition, but they're not the only way to reach voters. So.
And you are spending a lot of time on the ground here in Iowa.
We are, reaching voters.
What's your favorite Iowa story so far?
Oh gosh, I can't have just one. Well, last night we were in Ankeny, right. And it was just a wonderful crowd of people. It was our first town hall that we held there. We had some live music. We were at the Mistress Brewing Company, and it was just great fun.
Great. Well, I know we'll be seeing more of you, and
yes.
folks, if you'd like to keep in touch with Tulsi Gabbard, she's got a website, imagine that.
Visit tulsi2020.com, or you can follow me on social media at Tulsi Gabbard on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
All right, thanks for joining us. And folks, we're inviting all the presidential candidates to appear on this program. Again, thanks to my producer, Ashley Martinez, to our post-production coordinator, Sherry Herdina, to station manager, Juan Rodriguez. Again, stay tuned if you're listening on our community-owned stations for more talk after this.